Good morning. Well, we'll have people that will show up in time. Glad to see everyone. Let's open with a word of thanksgiving. Gracious God, for the gift of friendship and faith and family, we are grateful. We're grateful for times where we can gather around your word that may inspire our lives and give us good hopes through Christ our Lord. Amen. So today we're going to look at John 11, which arguably can be the best told tale in the Gospel of John and one of the most memorable tales in the Gospel of John. Let's remember that the Gospel of John gives us 7 signs, 7 major miraculous events that sort of frame the whole book. And this one is the 6th of 7. This one is like the 7th in one sense, that someone comes back from the dead. It's different than the 7th in that this is a resuscitation and Jesus is a resurrection. And we'll talk about sort of the difference of that. But this is a resuscitation. You like that, Terry?
You know my point about that.
I know, yeah, okay.
My point about that is, if it's okay, the difference between resuscitation and resurrection is that the person who is resurrected is no longer susceptible to death. Then, until the person who is resuscitated does die, it's resurrection, and you can't prove it's not.
Okay, thank you for that lesson in logic. Okay. But this ain't logical. This is kind of moves beyond logic. Anyway, I think this is such a well-told tale that what I would propose is that we read sections of it and talk about it as we go along, okay? And so I will start us off. The first 16 verses.
I don't know.
Oh, yeah, sure.
Where are you?
Chapter 11 of John.
John.
On page 105.
Okay.
You bet. So the first part of this story is about the lead up, and Jesus is nowhere near Bethany, which is a little town just east of Jerusalem. He's somewhere out in the hinterlands, we don't know where, and this is what happens. Now a certain man was ill, Lazarus of Bethany, the village of Mary and her sister Martha. Mary was the one who anointed the Lord with perfume and wiped his feet with her hair. Her brother Lazarus was ill. So the sisters sent a message to Jesus. Lord, he whom you love is ill. But when Jesus heard it, he said, this illness does not lead to death. Rather, it is for God's glory, so that the Son of God may be glorified through it. Accordingly, though Jesus loved Martha and her sister and Lazarus, after having heard that Lazarus was ill, he stayed 2 days longer in the place where he was. Then after this, Jesus said to the disciples, let us go to Judea again. The disciples said to him, Rabbi, the Jews were just now trying to stone you, and are you going to go there again? And Jesus answered, are there not 12 hours of daylight? Those who walk during the day do not stumble because they see the light of this world. But those who walk at night stumble because the light is not in them. And after saying this, he told them, our friend Lazarus has fallen asleep, but I'm going there to awaken him. And the disciples said to him, Lord, if he has fallen asleep, he will be all right. And Jesus, however, had been speaking about his death, but they thought he was merely referring to sleep. Then Jesus told them plainly, Lazarus is dead. For your sake, I am glad I was not there, so that you may believe. But let us go to him. Thomas, who was called the twin, said to his fellow disciples, let us go also, that we may die with him. Hi, Bruce. Good morning. Isn't that a great setup? This chapter is about a relationship that Jesus has with this lovely family. Lazarus and his two sisters. We're not told if Lazarus has a wife. We're not told if Mary and Martha have husbands. It's just family unit of a brother and two sisters. God understand that. And they apparently lived together in Bethany. And we get a forewarning of what's going to happen in chapter 12, because Mary is going to put enormously expensive ointment on Jesus' feet in chapter 12. We get a foretaste of that at the beginning here. And here's what happens. Lazarus gets sick, and Mary and Martha know that Jesus at least is in the vicinity. We're not sure where. And they send a message. Come quick, Lazarus is sick. And Jesus does something that's very odd. He hangs around for 2 days, and says, look, he's merely sleeping. And the disciples, by the way, the most common metaphor for death in the New Testament is sleep. That's the common metaphor. Well, he says he's sleeping, and they think he means, well, he has his head on the pillow, he'll wake up in 8 hours and it'll be fine. No, Jesus is saying he's sleeping, meaning Lazarus is dead. He has to spell it out, right? Lazarus is sleeping. Lazarus is dead. And then he explains, I don't want to go back now. I want to wait a bit. And then what I'm going to do is going to bring glory to God. And it's going to inspire people to believe in me. So remember, the signs in the Gospel of John are almost always public, and they broadcast to the whole world. This is the phrase goes, the Son of God. And so the signs point to the reality of the one who did them. And oftentimes Jesus will interpret the signs with his words, not always. In this passage, we'll get Jesus' interpretation in just a second. So the sign is done in order to inspire or engender belief. And sometimes Jesus interprets it, which he will in a second. Well, the disciples are flummoxed. And they say, don't you remember that at the end of chapter 10, they picked up stones to kind of do you in? And you want to go back to Jerusalem? I mean, Bethany is a suburb of Jerusalem. You want to go back to Jerusalem and expose yourself to death? And so one of the great lines of the Gospel of John, Thomas says, so let us go and die with him. For some of you who have read Dietrich Bonhoeffer's The Cost of Discipleship, that is the tagline of Bonhoeffer's Cost of Discipleship. Let us go and die with him. Take up your cross daily and die with him. So that is one of the best lines out of Bonhoeffer's book, how he uses Thomas's line. Let us go and die with him. So at the end of this little section, you get this sense that what Jesus is about to do may bring life to Lazarus, but it's going to bring the threat of death to Jesus. And what we'll discover in chapter 12, it also will bring the threat of death again to Lazarus. So this is a sign that calls forth belief, but what we're going to see is it's going to call forth belief in some and rejection in others. And that's exactly like all the signs in the Gospel of John. Just because a magnificent event is done, it doesn't automatically engender belief. What do you think about these first 16 verses? It's an incredible setup, isn't it? Once again, the disciples are, as I've called them many times, dunderheads. They really don't understand hardly anything Jesus is doing.
They have to give us something to relate to.
Yeah, right. Right. Think of them as the Keystone Cops, and we're a lot like them. Okay. Good, Terry.
Back to the point about resurrection and resuscitation. Okay. In this setup, Jesus says, this illness does not lead to death, and then says Lazarus is dead. Now, what is it?
I know, that's right, yeah. You know, it's those ambiguity of words, you know, he's alive, he's dead. Is he dead or is he sleeping? Well, this is not going to lead to death. So it's kind of, so Terry, those of you who have a lot of logic, you need to just park that at the door. John wasn't writing for you, Terry. Anyway. So let's read the next section. This is 17 through 27. Would somebody like to read that out loud? Please. Okay.
This is RSV.
Okay.
Now, when Jesus came, he found that Lazarus had already been in the tomb 4 days. Bethany was near Jerusalem, about 2 miles off, and many of the Jews had come to Martha and Mary to console them concerning their brother. When Martha heard that Jesus was coming, she went and met him, while Mary sat in the house. Martha said to Jesus, "Lord, if you had been here, my brother would not have died. And even now I know that whatever you ask from God, God will give you." Jesus said to her, "Your brother will rise again." Martha said to him, "I know that he will rise again in the resurrection at the last day." Jesus said to her, "I am the resurrection and the life. He who believes in me, though he die, yet shall he live. And whoever lives and believes in me shall never die. Do you believe this?" She said to him, "Yes, Lord. I believe that you are the Christ, the Son of God, he who is coming into the world."
Great. Thank you. So Martha ends up making the confession that Jesus wants all people to make when they see what he's going to do with Lazarus. I mean, that's the goal of a sign. And if a sign does its work, then you say, "I believe that you are the Christ, the Son of the living God, the one coming into the world." That's the point of a sign. But step back. Martha is very upset with Jesus. Jesus is a Johnny-come-lately, and she probably would have been more upset if she had known that he told his disciples, "Let's wait here a couple of days." You know, like, why? Why? Because in the meantime, Lazarus dies, right? And if you had only been here, and by the way, Mary will make the same charge in just a moment. She will wonder why he delayed. And so Jesus is kind of right off the bat, he's exposed to what? Physical danger in Jerusalem and disappointment among Mary and Martha, the two people that he loves very much. So right off the bat, there's this tension that's coming Jesus' way, right? Then Jesus does something very interesting. He says, "Look, Lazarus will rise." Oh yeah, I know all about that, you know, on the last day. And by the way, in Israel, about the only place that there's an explicit promise about a resurrection on the last day is in the 12th chapter of the book of Daniel. It's a very late text, probably during the Maccabean revolt, 160 years before Jesus. Most of the other references to we will stand before the Lord, or Ezekiel 37, Valley of Dry Bones, and all that stuff, Terry, is resuscitation language. You know, yeah, you know, that people are going to come back from the dead, either literally or metaphorically, or maybe better, they're going to come back from exile and come back to new life in Israel. That's where most of those passages from Isaiah 26 and others are about. Daniel 12 is the only place in the Old Testament that has an explicit notion of a resurrection to eternal life. That's it. And apparently the Pharisees had believed that. The Sadducees did not. Why did the Sadducees not believe that? Because it was in Daniel. And the Sadducees only took the first 5 books of the Bible as authoritative, Genesis to Deuteronomy. So Daniel is a very late text. Pharisees believed it. Apparently Jesus believed it, and Mary believes it, and Martha believes it. And that's what they're referring to, is that someday in the future. But Jesus then turns it into a present tense. You know, I am the resurrection and the life. By the way, my wife told me a funny story, and those of you who like Spanish, maybe you'll find it funny. She said that one of her Spanish friends went to a grocery store with her and saw on the counter in the dairy section this material said soy milk, and she said, why would they name it I am milk? So that's that's a little Spanish humor for those of you who like that sort of thing. Anyway, in the Spanish New Testament, I checked it. It is soy. I am the resurrection. Soy, you know. Okay. So Jesus then says, no, it's
Gives you
not.
an idea about how translations are.
Yeah, right. Yeah. So the point is, it's not in the sweet by and by. It's going to be right now. And in the Gospel of John, you seldom get the phrase, the kingdom of God coming at the end of time. Rather, in the Gospel of John, the phrase that's used most of the time is life. I came to bring life, or abundant life, or eternal life. It's about what's happening now. Yes, and the future too, but it's about right now. God is intervening in history. So Jesus tells her, look, you may hope rightly for a resurrection at the end of days, but watch, this is going to happen right now. I am the resurrection life. It's of the many, there are 46 I am statements in the Gospel of John, from I am the gate, I am the door, I'm the bread of life, etc. This is the most important, by far. By far, this is the most important. When he reveals to Mary, I am the resurrection and the life. Those who believe in me, even though they die, will live. And everybody who lives and believes in me will never die. Do you believe this? Now, Gary, here's where you have a weird mixing of resuscitation language and resurrection language. Because here's the thing that's curious about Lazarus. He's dead. He's gonna come back to life, and then he's gonna die again. Yeah. So again, take this language with the ambiguity I think that it's supposed to have for us. So far, so good. Thoughts, questions about this encounter between Jesus and Martha. And Martha is a little put out with him. Where you been, Buster? You know, thought you were our friend. Okay, would someone be kind enough then to read 28 through, let's go ahead through 44. So now we're going to get to the actual scene of going to the tomb. So would somebody read that out loud? Okay.
With these words, Martha went back and called her sister Mary. Teacher has come, she said to her privately, he's asking for you. When she heard that, she got up quickly and went to him. Jesus hadn't yet got into the village. He was still in the place where Martha had met him. The Judeans were in the house with Mary, solely with her. Saw her get up quickly and go out. They guessed that she was going to the tomb to weep there, and they followed her. When Mary came to where Jesus was, she saw him and fell down at his feet. Master, she said, if only you had been here, my brother wouldn't have died. But Jesus saw her crying. The Judeans who had come with her crying, he stirred in the spirit and very troubled. Where have you laid him? He asked. Master, they said, come and see. He burst into tears. Looks at the Judeans. See how much he loved him? Well, yes, some of them said, but he opened the eyes of a blind man, didn't he? Couldn't he have done something to stop this fellow from dying?
Oh yeah, but let's stop there. Okay. So here is the exchange between Jesus and Mary. And Mary has come out and she too makes the same question that Martha did. If you had only been here, my brother would not have died. When I read this text, I'm sometimes reminded of a couple of EMS folks that I've had in other churches who would be called to a scene, and they would get there just a minute or two late, where someone had already died. You could try, but there was really nothing you could do. A couple of my friends who were EMS said, there's nothing more frustrating than showing up just a couple of minutes late, and so Jesus shows up late, and Mary wants to know, why weren't you here? And then what's interesting, that there's no answer that Jesus gives to that, because now he sees all the grief. And by the way, in that first century setting, it was considered very important to do public grief, and for it to be emotive and not, to sit quietly like Jacqueline Kennedy, during the funeral. But it was to be emotional about this. And sometimes people would sing sad songs, and there'd be loud wailing, and it was considered appropriate to do that. So some of you have been in other cultures where people are much more expressive about either their joy or their sadness, And here in this culture, everybody's crying. Mary's crying, and then who ends up crying? Jesus. It's in my Sunday school, we had to do Bible memorization verses. This was, of course, our favorite, the shortest verse in the New Testament, right? Jesus wept. But the power of it is really, you wonder what was going on in Jesus' head. I did this. I stayed away intentionally. I waited 2 days before he died. I'm then confronted by Martha, who asked me this poignant question. Then I have to deal with that question from Mary, the same question. And maybe it just got to him, and seeing all the people crying. I don't know if you've ever been in a culture where people are much, much more expressive about crying. And Jesus is in that culture, and he mirrors it because he cries, right? It's the only place I think that I know of in the Gospels where he cries, or at least it's reported that he cries. I'm sure that there were other times he felt like crying, but he cried. So one of the things that I keep reminding myself is that, we're given the ability to cry for a reason. It helps us. It's an emotional release, and grief and tears are okay, and not only okay, but needed. And so many times when we need to express that grief, and holding it in, I don't know.
In some cultures, there are professional mourners that are hired to come and mourn very openly and loudly.
Yeah.
Get people mourn.
Yeah, I guess so. Prime the pump, Yes.
I have a thought, kind of far out there, but when Jesus heard that Lazarus was at death's door, and he was in Jerusalem, and he waited 2 days, I wonder if he had resurrection on his mind, and when Lazarus died, and he especially saying, I am the resurrection.
Right.
I don't know. That was just a
Well,
thought.
earlier in the text, he does say, I'm glad in a sense that we can stay away because I want to display the glory of God. So he sees that this could be an incredible sign. And it is the highlight sign. It is the sixth and best sign before the resurrection, right? Yeah. So I'm thinking, at least the way John portrays it, this is sort of Jesus' plan. And though it's painful, and when he sees Martha first, then Mary, it breaks his heart. It really does. Lazarus is his friend. By the way, in the Gospel of John, we have this mysterious figure. A little bit later, we'll find him, called the beloved disciple. And he's never named. We don't know who he was, right? There really is a strong case to be made that it might have been Lazarus. I mean, he was a close friend. And when it says beloved disciple, it doesn't necessarily mean he was one of the 12, because he's never named. He's never named. But anyway. So now Jesus is caught up in the grief. He's outside the town, and now what does he want to know? Where is he? And notice that the accusation at the end of this reading is from the other folks that are mourning with Mary. Hey,
Jews.
yeah, the other Jews. Look, he opened the eyes of the blind. Remember John 9? Couldn't he have saved his best friend? So in a sense, this whole healing story that it's about to happen is surrounded with accusations. If only, and couldn't he have, so Jesus, and then he's crying. So one of the ways to look at this story is go to the tomb and do something, do something, please. And here we go. So let's read then from 38 through 44. I'll read it. Then Jesus, again, greatly disturbed. So I mean, he goes there in a state of agitation, greatly disturbed, came to the tomb. It was a cave, and a stone was lying against it. And Jesus said, take away the stone. And Martha, always the practical one, the sister of the dead man, said to him, Lord, already there is a stench because he has been dead 4 days. 4 days is key because 4 days means they're really dead. If you'd come the day after, well, maybe the ghost was hanging. No, 4 days, you're dead, right? Okay. Jesus said to her, did I not tell you that if you believed, you would see the glory of God? So they took away the stone, and Jesus looked upward and said, Father, I thank you for having heard me. I knew that you always hear me, but I have said this for the sake of the crowd standing there, so that they may believe that you sent me. When he said this, he cried with a loud voice, Lazarus, come out. The dead man came out, his hands and feet bound with strips of cloth, and his face wrapped in a cloth. And Jesus said, unbind him and let him go. And we're, I think, to assume he didn't smell that bad. Anyway, or we can hope.
And bathed in 4 days.
Yeah, I know, 4 days. By the way, most burials in that climate were done the day of death, just because, there's no embalming and et cetera. Okay. What's great about this is that Jesus goes to the tomb and he's upset. I mean, that's a picture we don't often see in this narrative. He is, the text says, greatly disturbed. He's still emotional about this whole thing. And when he says, look, let's move the stone, Martha is really, she had said, I believe that you are the resurrection life, but not that. That? Yes, now, right now.
Embarrassing.
It is, yeah.
For the family.
Yes, I mean, imagine what people will say, and people looking around might have said, why are you opening this stone up? We put him in there to rest in peace, right? Well, at this point, Jesus speaks the word, and we're to be reminded in John 1, Jesus is called the Word that was with God, the Word that was God. And the Word that spoke the creation into existence in Genesis 1 is now going to speak a new word of creation, a new creation of this man who's dead. And it's a sign of what is to come. So in the New Testament language, it's called a proleptic sign of what is yet to come, of what is, and it most immediately is going to come in Jesus' resurrection, which is a proleptic sign of what is to come on the last day. So these signs point forward to what's about to happen. And by the way, some of you have been to Ghost Ranch, and if you're walking from the office up to the cafeteria, so walk with me from the the main office up to the cafeteria. Off to the left, some of you may have noticed a storm shelter. It's got some big doors going. Does anybody remember that? Is it just me? Okay. Well, when this ranch was originally built, they had a little storm shelter, and it's kind of a little mound, and it's got these two doors, on it. Except, well, one time when I was at Ghost Ranch, we did an early morning devotional, and the leader of the devotion read from John 11, and he says, "I want to demonstrate what it was like," and somebody was inside of there. and they opened those doors, and he had toilet paper all around. And he walked out, and every time I go by, oh, Lazarus' soul, come forth. Get out there with that toilet paper. Anyway, so Lazarus comes out. And by the way, there is a play, and I wouldn't necessarily recommend you read it. It's by Eugene O'Neill. It's entitled Lazarus Laughed. And he retells the story of the resuscitation of Lazarus. And when they finally unbind him, he starts laughing hilariously. And they ask him, well, why are you laughing? And he says, well, I have to do this again.
We read something in first 44 days up there.
Go ahead.
Because what we read when we read that, when we see that, is the man who was dead came, who had been dead.
The dead man came out.
It says the dead man came out. Now, how did that happen?
Yeah, right. See, Terry, the logic there says it was a dead man, but the metaphor says the man who used to be dead. Right. No, I get your point. Yes, sir.
If he was alive part of that time in the cave, surely he would have unwrapped himself.
Yeah, you would think, yeah. He's
Especially if his face is all.
yeah, because when they buried him, they put their hands together like this, and they wrapped him from their feet to their head, right here. Then they took cloth and wrapped it this way, and then they put a burial cloth, a face cloth on him like this. And by the way, that's what's described. We'll get that description in John 20 when we talk about the tomb. You'll see that again. Okay. So, yeah, I know. I think he's kind of waddling. At least the guy with the toilet paper, that's how he walked. So I don't know. I don't have a camera.
Where you got breaking the water.
Yeah, right. So he comes out, right? Lazarus, come forth. And my mind goes to those two doors and goes strange. Guy comes out. Anyway, so right now, if you just stopped right there, you'd go, oh my goodness, this is an incredible event. In the Gospels, there are only a few resuscitations. There is the son of the widow of Nain in Luke, and then there's Jairus's daughter, who's resuscitated from the dead. Then you have Jesus' command in Matthew 10 to go into the villages and announce the kingdom and, quote, heal the sick and raise the dead. There's no narratives that the disciples actually did that. And then you have this curious story at the end of Matthew when Jesus is crucified. The moment he dies, all these people come up from the graves and walk around Jerusalem. But what I'm trying to say is resuscitations in the Gospels are rare events. Now, remember, we have Elijah and Elisha who do resuscitations themselves, right? Later in Acts, Acts is structured that anything Peter can do, Paul can do better, that sort of thing. So you have a Peter resuscitation, one, and then remember, Paul preaches all night, and Eutychus falls asleep from the I always think of the third story, and he, you know, drops dead, and Paul goes down and resuscitates him and keeps preaching, you know. So what I'm trying to say is resuscitations in the Bible are very rare. Basically, I can count them on two hands. I think I've given you all of them. So don't think that this sort of thing is happening with any sense of regularity. In the Gospel of John, this is the ultimate sign because it is so astonishing. Now, so at the end of this resuscitation, unbind him and let him go, then you would think, oh my gosh, this is going to seal the deal. Everybody's going to believe, and Jesus is going to be acclaimed, as Martha said, the Son of God, the Messiah who is to come, right? Well, not so fast. Okay. Verse 45. Many of the Jews, therefore, who had come with Mary and had seen what Jesus did, believed in him. That's what they want. That's what you want for a sign, right? Just like Martha had said a minute ago. But, verse 46, big but some of them went to the Pharisees and told them what he had done. So the chief priests and the Pharisees called a meeting of the council and said, what are we to do? This man is performing many signs. If we let him go on like this, everyone will believe in him, and the Romans will come and destroy both our holy place and our nation. Now, quick aside, remember the Gospel of John was written after 70. So this has already happened, that the Romans have destroyed the temple, right? But one of them, Caiaphas, who was high priest that year, said to them, you know nothing at all. You do not understand that it is better for you to have one man die for the people than to have the whole nation destroyed. But he did not say this on his own. But being high priest that year, he prophesied that Jesus was about to die for the nation, and not for the nation only, but to gather into one the dispersed children of God. So from that day on, they planned to put him to death. Jesus, therefore, no longer walked about openly among the Jews, but went from there to a town called Ephraim in the region near the wilderness, and he remained there with the disciples. Now the Passover of the Jews was near, and many went up from the country to Jerusalem before the Passover to purify themselves. They were looking for Jesus and were asking one another as they stood in the temple, what do you think? Surely he will not come to the festival, will he? Now the chief priests and the Pharisees had given orders that anyone who knew where Jesus was should let them know so that they might arrest him. Well, how do you like that for a grand coming out party? Come to Bethany, raise Lazarus from the dead, and now they want to kill you. And as we'll learn in chapter 12, they also want to kill Lazarus while they're at it, you know, right? And so remember how Thomas had said, this is going to be dangerous? At the end of John 11, Jesus realizes the danger is everywhere and sort of goes out to Ephraim. We're not quite sure where it is. If you look at Bible maps, sometimes it's north of Jerusalem and sometimes it's south into the wilderness area. As soon as you go south of Jerusalem, it becomes a desert area. I've often said it looks like Lordsburg pretty quickly. Okay. So isn't it ironic that after he does this, he heads for the hills, literally. He literally heads for the hills to get out of town because the danger now is posed by what? The Caiaphas, who, by the way, in this story will pose a death penalty for him, in effect, you know, or at least be a part of the conspiracy. But isn't it interesting? The Gospel of John has people say stuff that has double meanings. You know, he's sleeping, you know, and all that stuff. Here, Caiaphas ends up saying, Jesus will die on behalf of the people.
Yeah,
Isn't that marvelous? I mean, he doesn't know what he's saying, you know, but that's what Jesus is doing. Unbeknownst to Caiaphas, he speaks the truth. I've often thought that one of the things that's kind of funny about watching politicians is sometimes almost against their will, the truth comes out, say, it's like they inadvertently blurt out the truth sometimes, right? And here's Caiaphas inadvertently telling the truth about Jesus. But also remember, this gospel is written when the Romans had done exactly what Caiaphas said they would do, but not because of Jesus, but because of a revolt within the Jewish community against Rome, right? So what do you make of this way the story ends? Jesus does a miracle. A lot of the Jews believe, Mary and Martha ostensibly believe, and I'm assuming Lazarus believes too, right? Although what's funny is Lazarus doesn't get any lines. What do you think, Lazarus?
It's also sometimes given as proof that somebody's alive that they eat.
Did they what?
That they eat.
Oh, yeah.
And at the beginning of chapter 12, they have a dinner.
Absolutely,
Lazarus
yeah.
is there.
Yeah. Lazarus, Mary and Martha throw a banquet. After all, he brought our brother back from the dead. Let's have a banquet, right?
But the fact that Lazarus was there at the banquet is sort of probably given as proof that he was alive.
Yeah. Yes, exactly. By the way, in my mind, I had this little imaginary scene, so bear with me a second. Imagine for a moment that the son of the widow of Nain and Jairus' daughter and all those people who came out of the tombs, when Jesus died, had a little gathering after the resurrection of Jesus. And they'd gotten together and they said, wow, death, he brought us back from death. And in Eugene O'Neill's play, here's what Lazarus does say, because Eugene O'Neill was frustrated, Terry, that Lazarus got no lines. So here's the line that's in Lazarus' mouth in the play. Death is destroyed. Death is destroyed. Life is here. Laugh with me. And Lazarus just keeps repeating that line. Death is dead. Life is affirmed, something like that. But the last phrase is laugh with me. And so now Lazarus' house is renamed the house of laughter, And so you think about the psalmist, he says, while weeping may tarry for the night, joy comes in the morning. It's that kind of change where they were all weeping, even Jesus weeping. Now Lazarus laughs. Anyway, it's a nice way to end the play, and it's only the best part of the play. All right, so in John, Jesus' resuscitation of Lazarus is seen as the primary, most significant sign that Jesus does. And notice what happens. A lot of his followers, those who were around Mary and Martha, they believe, and then you have rejection. And I've said this a million times, please allow me to say it again. There's nothing more ambiguous in the Bible than miracles. They are not ever self-authenticating. Now, let me give you an example. Jesus tells 58 or 60 parables, depending on how you number, okay? There's one parable with one named character. What parable did Jesus tell where a character in the parable actually has a name? Terry knows because he's been in my class. Can you think? I'll give you a hint. There was a rich man and Lazarus. He's the only named character. Now think with me about the impact of the Lazarus story on the early church. Think about it. Jesus tells a parable about a rich man, and he has everything he ever wanted, and he has a poor man outside of his gate named Lazarus that he hardly even notices. And the rich man is Yeah, and Lazarus says, if only I could eat from the crumbs from the rich man's table. So, as in a lot of folk tales, there's a reversal of fortune. The rich man dies and is in Hades, and he is thirsty and desirous of something to drink. The Lazarus dies, and he's, quote, in the bosom of Abraham. The analogy here is Abraham is holding, you'll like this, Nicole, a sleeping baby. So the bosom of Abraham means he's like a baby asleep in Abraham's arms. Sleep, death, right? And now the rich man pleads to God, please listen, get me out of here. No, I'm sorry, you had all you wanted in your time, now you're getting what you didn't give to Lazarus. And he said, well, look, if I can't get out of this, then would you please send someone to my brothers who were just as snotty and indifferent as I am. And here's the turn of the parable and why the name Lazarus gets in it. Remember what the punchline is? I'm going to give you the punchline. If your brothers will not listen to Moses and the prophets, they will not listen, ready, quote, if someone were to come back from the dead. Get it? Lazarus has come back from the dead, and people still don't get it. So, by the way, those of you who like Christmas plays, you know, the greatest Christmas play of all time, of course, you know, Christmas Carol, right? And Scrooge, you know, and Scrooge does get someone back from the Christmas past, Christmas present, Christmas future. And lo and behold, Scrooge, unlike the Caiaphas, changes, right? Because somebody came back from the dead and said, look, Scrooge, you know, look what you're doing. So the Scrooge story is different than the parable of the rich man and Lazarus, right? The Scrooge story is a lot more optimistic about what can happen. But here's the point. The Gospel of John ends with Jesus raising someone from the dead and then hightailing it out of town because of the danger. Just think about that. And so it prefigures what's going to happen to Jesus.
Then he comes back.
Yeah. And it's going to happen again. It's going to happen to Jesus. And just because you raise someone from the dead and present them, no, let's kill Jesus. And while we're at it, let's take out Lazarus yet again. It's an amazing story. I mean, I got to tell you, the most ambiguous narrative in the Bible across the board are miracles. And where does it start? It starts with Pharaoh, who gets 10 big ones, right? And then drowns in the Red Sea.
Like Antifa and the Proud Boys.
There you go. Yeah. So anyway, here's what I would want y'all to know is that Lazarus coming back to life will be just as controversial as the early church saying Jesus has come back to life. And some will believe and some will not. So I've often heard people many, many times say, if I had just been there, if I had just seen a miracle, if and Kierkegaard, who's one of my favorite theologians, said that, look, even if you had been there, you are faced with the same stumbling block of belief as the original hearers and witnesses. So look at what the original hearers and witnesses did, and you realize we would be in the same situation of having to make a decision of faith. Well, no, this is from God, or no, this is going to kill the nation.
And the thing is, it's a decision you have to make to abandon what you've built up over the years, right?
Yeah.
And that's what the Sadducees versus the Pharisees, maybe, I don't know, they've got their
They-
background, they've got it all worked out,
Yeah.
and somehow you have to jump over the fence.
Yeah.
And that's a hard thing to do.
And I think that's why Luke tells the story of the rich man and Lazarus. The reversal of fortunes that are involved here. By the way, here's another little question. Whatever happened to Lazarus and Mary and Martha after Jesus is crucified and risen? What happened to them? And the text never tells us. But I wonder, this is just a little wondering, if things had become a little dangerous for Lazarus after Jesus. And the question about this beloved disciple thing is that it appears that the beloved disciple becomes sort of a missionary. Did he up and leave Bethany? I'm not arguing that he was the beloved disciple. I'm just saying there's evidence to think that someone like Lazarus might have been that beloved disciple. I don't think it was John, the brother of James. I just don't, for a lot of reasons. But anyway, otherwise he would have been named, right? I mean, what I think. Okay. Well, dear friends in digital land, does anybody have any comments or thoughts? Judy, glad to see you up and going. Hope you're feeling better. Fabulous. Great. Any thoughts in digital land?
Thank you, Frank.
Thank you, Lane. You have another thought, Lane? I'm sure you do.
I have many thoughts, Frank, but I'll
Yeah.
save them for later.
Yeah, I'll hear them on Tuesday, okay?
Okay.
Yeah, all right. Well, okay, so this is the best told tale in the Gospel of John. This is the highlight, and it's really the gospel in miniature, because it's about someone who is the resurrection of life, brings forth someone who's alive, a new creation, and then you have the divide. The Mary and Martha who say, you are the Messiah, the Son of God, the one who's coming into the world. And the others who say, if this guy keeps doing this, it's going to kill us all, right? So let's kill him and let's kill Lazarus. So it's the gospel in miniature right there. It's the best told tale. Okay, so next week we will go to chapter 12, and we will again see this sort of story of how things are going to lead up finally to Jesus' crucifixion and resurrection. So we'll do chapter 12 next week. Okay?
Okay.
Sound good? Grace and peace. See y'all soon.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Frank.
You're welcome.
Thank you, Frank.
Bye, y'all. Okay.